By the way, the Laguna Salada used to have a lot of water. Right now it's dry, but it used to have a lot of water. Now, the Colorado River Land Company had conflict with the Cucapas over labor. The Cucapas were like, we're not gonna work this hour, we work only to survive. We're not gonna allow you to exploit us. So there's a conflict of culture. The Colorado River Land Company never wanted to employ the Native Americans, or Cucapa Nation, because they falsely assumed that they only knew how to work small farms. And therefore, not only did they assume they only knew how to work small farms, but they were ignorant, they were dumb, because they couldn't barely understand Spanish. So, this work, we have to self-analyze ourselves. Does racism against indigenous exist to this day in Mexico? A lot. Terms that I'm not going to be saying in this class exist to put down the Native Americans in Mexico. Simple idea that white is better, it has affected the Native Americans. And I'm not going to give you, there's various examples that we can talk about. The Cucapas are an example of that racism. Even by the Mexican people, where the Cucapas were working, and like, see, they're doing the job wrong. We're not giving them a chance. We're not giving them instructions properly of how to work the land. By 1910, only a few colonies existed on land owned by the Colorado River Land Company that was worked by the Cucapas. They had quit. They left. They left because they cannot survive. They could. They're like, you are destroying our traditions of fishing. They'll sing a song while fishing. They'll sing a song while the sun is rising, and you are not allowing me to do this. So they are leaving, right? They're leaving the Colorado. By the early 1920s, the Colorado River Land Company is like, we need more employees, right? And they are getting their employees by allowing the Chinese to arrive. By 1920, they have stopped employing the Cucapas. Economic problems within the Cucapa community due to the lack of job opportunities is beginning to hit them. Now the Colorado by 1920 owns a lot of land, a lot of resources. Water is lacking in the delta. There's less fish, less water. So how would this affect them? Okay, there's not a lot of fish. There's not a lot of water. We gotta go to Mexicali and find a job. They'll go to Mexicali and find a job. Can you hire me? No, I'm not gonna hire you. Look at you. The word indio, the word, the insults they get. So many of the Cucapas would be working low salary jobs in Mexicali and then go back to our land. And there's where they're beginning to suffer poverty and lack of resources. Health sanitation conditions are beginning to get worse and worse because there's pollution in the delta now. The Colorado now owns land, and cotton is being sprayed with pesticides, and that water polluted goes to the Colorado Delta and is polluting the fish. It's polluting them. So you understand what's going on, right? Some of them find jobs in Mexicali, but many Mexicans and Chinese. Okay, here's the problem with race. Chinese don't want to hire Mexicanos because there's a cultural conflict, nor Cucapas, nor Mexicanos want to hire Cucapas nor Chinese. And so you see here there's a race and national identity. Right? And so they didn't want to hire the Cucapas. So here we start to see alienation, marginalization, on the Cucapa community. And here we see the Cucapas waiting to get hired by the steamboat. By 1910, the Colorado River Land Company had bought almost all of the land that was owned by the Cucapa. And the Cucapas are considered to be, are beginning to get mad because that land is sacred. It's sacred to them. It's tierra sagrada. For those that have taken me before, you gotta understand, where we talked how Native American Genesis, the Garden of Eden, is right there next door. For the Yaquis, it is El Río Sonora. For the Series, it is El Mar, Mar de Cortés. For the Cucapas, it's the Delta. So their Garden of Eden, their Genesis is right next door. Their sacred land is right next door. And so they felt insulted, they felt they had lost. And when you have a low self-esteem, when you feel lost, you're not gonna fight. You're not gonna fight, you're gonna commit what? Suicide. Suicide is beginning to happen, but not only that, alcoholism is beginning to arrive within the Cucapa Nation. They would try to have ceremonies, but it became impossible for them to have rituals near the Colorado River. Corral Land Company had rights on parts of the Delta by building irrigation canals. So, the dark side of modernity. Dr. Gravilla, my mentor, his class, Chicano 500, the first day of class, he said, modernity has a dark side, and it's this. You know, I mean, we love technology, but technology always has a dark side. Always think, guys, always think, how is this gonna affect my community? By creating unemployment or by polluting? I know this sounds ridiculous, guys, but we have to come to that stage in our life and so that we have to always overthink. I know, it sounds like amargado, but it's not. Once you take Chicano studies with Grandia, you're like, how is this gonna affect my community? Or how is this gonna affect me or my friends? So this is the dark side of modernidad. By 1970, the population of the Mexicans and foreigners, Chinese, Anglo-Americans, Japanese as well, had begun to increase in Mexicali due to the immigration policies of the then territory governor Esteban Cantú. You know who he is, guys? Esteban Cantú. He was governor of Baja California. He was the one who brought the Chinese to Mexicali. He is the one who founded La Casa de la Cultura, before known as La Escuela Cuauhtémoc. 600,500 acres of land had begun to be developed among the American company and other farmers as well. These lands were near La Sierra Pucapá, the homeland of the Pucapás. The outcome plus immigration policies will make the Pucapás lose their traditions, lose their land. By the way, you want to know something sad? In 2020, the elder of the Pucapás, I got her name, she knew, I think, 80% of the language. She passed away of COVID in 2020. Her daughter only knows like 60% of the language, and the language is disappearing. And lenguaje se está muriendo. The traditions are dying. In December, I went with a friend of mine to visit the Pucapá community, and the museum is really abandoned. The community is abandoned. I want to go back, but it broke my heart. It really broke my heart. I have no words to describe it, guys. It's heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking because politicians all the time go and, oh, we're gonna help you, and they're still living in poverty. And I'm like, we gotta do something. We gotta do something. We're gonna talk about the Chinese right now, guys. There's this movie article on the Pucapá community. By 1920, the population of Pucapás had decreased because of various factors. One, many of the Pucapás that stayed in the Valley Mexicali could not survive the capitalist market economy that had been introduced by the Mexican government and the Corral Land Company. This will bring poverty and marginalization to their community that we still see today. Number two, disease into their communities due to the pollution of the Corral River by farming companies like the Corral Land Company, meat companies. Oh, by the way, Mexicali is beginning to become capital of la carne asada. I love it, but it pollutes. Where do you think the blood of the cows go? Where do you think the leftovers of the cows go?
In the drains and the sewers?
And to the river. Exactamente. De eso te lleva el corral. And the steamboat companies. Where would the steamboat companies throw the feces and urine of their guests? Yeah. The water of the Corral River began to be less available to the Pucapás due to the creation of canals and the increase in population of Mexicali and Imperial Valley. There we go. This will also cause a decrease of fish, which will force many Pucapás to leave behind their ways of life and work for the Corral Land Company to get money to buy food for the communities. Dark side of modernity. This is a chapter I'm beginning to develop. This will be chapter 5 for my thesis and my doctorate. And it's ready. Actually, it's ready to, I stop. When I get to the doctorate, I'll say, I'm ready for my thesis for chapter number 5, senores. Because it's 4 chapters, but this will be chapter number 5. I know, all right. I'm sorry, guys. I know, that's why sometimes we talk about this in my history class, I don't like talking about this. but we have to. And this is how the Delta looks right now. I know, guys. I know. No, nobody knows, ¿verdad? Ay. Chinese. All right. In 1914, here's when the Chinese arrived. This is chapter now. Let's call this section 2. The Chinese are beginning to arrive to Mexicali by 1914, when General Esteban Cantú became governor of Baja California. This is their passport to come in. Cantú was known for allowing foreigners to live and work in Baja California. He is responsible for the arrival of Chinese to Mexicali. He came to work, right, to make the world a company. Other Chinese that arrived to Mexicali, see, you have various Chinese arriving to Mexicali by this time, by 1914. Factor number 1, Cantú brought them. Factor number 2, they're escaping Sonora and Sinaloa. And why? Because there's an anti-Chinese campaign in the Mexican Revolution. By the way, Pancho Villa, el héroe de la revolución. You know, ¿qué pasó? ¿Qué hizo Pancho Villa?
No, pues ahorita la verdad yo no me acuerdo por qué es.
No, pero ¿qué hizo contra los chinos? ¿No sabes?
No me acuerdo.
All right.
¿Qué shit? No me acuerdo.
Well, here's the thing. You know what he did? Google when you have time. Massacre of Torreón, 1911. La masacre de Torreón. Pancho Villa and his Dorados killed the Chinese in the city of Torreón, Coahuila. Pancho Villa and his camisas doradas considered the Chinese to be pawns of the Porfiriato. And so he'll go against the Chinese. Where is the cradle of the Mexican Revolution? Sonora, called La Una Revolución. Part of the agenda of the revolution was to go against the Chinese. Calles, who would be president of Mexico and part of the revolution, was against the Chinese. Obregón was against the Chinese, and he's from where? Sonora. Carranza, from Sonora. No, Carranza was from Coahuila, I think, but he was against the Chinese. So the ideals of the Mexican Revolution were Mexico para los mexicanos, but not the Chinese. Do you understand? So that's why by 1950, 1914, 1913, the Chinese are beginning to change their names. Instead of Li, Lei. And we all have gone to Casa Lei, which is known as Tienda Lei, which are the owners of those tomateros de Culiacán. All right. See, Chinese are in Mexico, but the Japanese had already been in Mexico. In 1888, during the Free Trade Migration Agreement signed by Porfirio Diaz and the government of Japan, until 1908, Japanese are arriving to Mexico, a large number of them. By 1917, Mexico and Japan signed another agreement that gave them free access to Mexico. See, the Japanese are beginning to arrive to Mexico because in Japan we had to go to the military. So another option is, well, let's go to Mexico or Peru or Brazil, because we don't want to go to the military. See, not all Japanese were supportive of the Empire of Japan. The majority of Japanese that arrived to Mexico were doctors, orthodontists, pharmacists, veterinarians, chemists, and the list goes on. And the agreement was they were going to last for 10 years. However, in 1921, the number of Japanese immigrants began to increase because of that Tobijose Act. And this act said that Japanese citizens that goes to live in Mexico, they could stay there, right? And again, they could also invite their relatives. If a relative invites you to live in Mexico, you can come and live in Mexico. So in the beginning, the Japanese were not so much hated because they had money. All right? Don't worry. The Japanese were not as much hurt as the Chinese. Unfortunately, they would by 1930 because of ignorance, because of hatred, because hate blinds your head, guys. Mexicali, 1920s. ¿Cómo era? Well, this is La Campana. Oh no, this is La Campana, where my mom would buy me doctors to go to school. By the beginning of the 1920s, the Chinese population is growing a lot in Mexicali, and the Chinese are not only working in the agrarian fields, they're also working in commerce. They have La Campana. This area will be known as La Chinesca. No, they didn't live underground. They didn't live underground. No, they didn't. They had basements to go to sleep at night or at day because it was fresh under the ground. Okay? They didn't have tunnels where they will be doing a lot of illegal things. No. The things is that if they were doing illegal things, the Mexican government knew about it, and they were called the casinos. And the Mexican government knew about it because in 1920, you had prohibition in the US. And a lot of Americans came to Mexicali to have a beer and go gamble and, I don't know, get to meet Mexicali Rose, which you know who's Mexicali Rose, right? You've heard the song Mexicali Rose? You know the story behind it? Mexicali Rose was a prostitute named Rosa. And this cowboy singer, country singer, fell in love with her and wrote this song called Mexicali Rose. There you go. Yeah. I know. And that was Mexicali in the 1920s. Like Vegas, basically. El Pequeño Monte Carlos, they'll call it. Monte Carlo is like a city in France that had casinos. Near La Chinesca, you had Japanese businesses where, I don't know, okay, who's been to downtown Mexicali? El Centro Histórico de Mexicali. Okay, you know where Haiku and all the Planta Libre are? That block used to be owned by the Japanese. You had laundry places, you had Japanese stores, Japanese restaurants. Okay, and Nuevo Japón, all of that block, all the way to the corner, used to be El Nuevo Japón, New Japan. And I know it because the Yasuhara family are good friends of mine. Sayuri Yasuhara is my childhood friend, and all this history I know it because of her. The Chinese, and we'll talk about the Japanese right now. The Chinese operated the first stores in Mexicali. See, the thing about the Chinese is this. Do Mexicans like working on Sundays? Let's be honest. No. Not even on weekdays. The cultural conflicts, there we go. The Chinese works 7 days a week. I'm telling you this because I have my godfather's Chinese Mexicano. And his work ethics is you work all day. These stores will open 7 days a week. Even in Christmas, they'll be open. Because they don't celebrate Christmas. They're not Catholics. They're Buddhists. Japanese began to be in charge of the ranches that produce cotton. The Chinese and Japanese also developed the land of the Valle de Mexicali during the 1900s and early 1910s. So they're not the founders, but they're developers. Remember what I said? They didn't found it, but they developed it. First, they will clean up the land, so the land is not working. It's like toda seca, all dry, and in the bottom you have the fertile land. So they have to dig up all this dry land so that the top land could be the fertile land. And that took years to do. Okay? And that's what they did. Second, they will grow seeds and harvest. Really careful. And they would also be the ones that clean up the irrigation canals. Not only were they growing cotton, they were growing. You know where the Obra del Canal 3 is? Wisteria? Okay, that used to be the land owned by my padrino's father, Leon, the Leon family, and they used to grow Chinese potato, papachina. Okay, they would grow all type of these vegetables in Mexicali. So the papachina would be grown there. It's a small potato. There we go, the flappers. American women would go to Mexicali and have a drink and have fun, right? And American men as well. Cotton will be called the white gold in the 1920s. Yeah, Mexicali is beginning to become big and rich. Americans are buying cotton. They need it. Or for clothes, for military clothes as well. The River Line Company gained huge profit because of this, and they're owning more land. At the same time, the U.S. has the prohibition laws. You're not allowed to drink in the U.S. from 1920 to 1929. It was against the law to drink and even make alcohol. So Californians were not dumb. They'll go to Tijuana. But if you're a movie star like Charles Chaplin, who likes the company of young women, where are you going to go to not be caught? To the desert. And what city would that be? Mexicali. Mexicali. Chaplin will come to Mexicali with his young girlfriends. By the way, Chaplin, this is true, guys. He liked young girls. Yeah, Chaplin was a great person, but great comedian. All right. Anyway, they came to have a drink, and this would be in the Tecolote. You know where the Tecolote is? Yeah, it's right now in Oxo. I know. Thank you, Mexicali, for making a historical building into a freaking Oxo. This used to be in the Tecolote. You know, I was looking into the archives, into the commercials, because I want to do a chapter on the commercials that people that existed in Mexicali, the beer commercials. There was Cerveza Imperial. Now, for us Mexicalenses, there's Leche Imperial. Do you remember? Leche Imperial, ¿se acuerdan de Leche Imperial? So I'm like, it's the same logo as, so I think the milk producer used to produce beer. But now that beer is not selling in 1930, he went to dairy products. Which I think, I mean, I don't know, pero se parece muy igual, ¿no? ¿No saben lo que so you have a Tecolote where American tourists would go and gamble, and they go to the Chinese casinos and gamble. But here's the thing, here's where the conflict began. The Chinese and Mexicans are not getting along. The Chinese are not allowing Mexicans to the casinos. Why? For Chinese, the Mexicans don't understand the rules, and therefore they are going to create conflict with the Americans. For the Mexicans, the Chinese are a bunch of haters, and they don't want them to allow them to go and play. The Mexicans are saying that the Chinese are stealing their women. The Chinese are saying, no, we're not stealing your woman. We're just, again, we're making them fall in love with us because we're good men. And the Mexican men are stealing Chinese women. So you have a conflict of, okay? And none of them are in the, I mean, I'm just giving you both sides. I'm not with both sides. Both sides are wrong. But when you have two groups fighting, something's going on. They're fighting, they don't hate each other, they're hating. The reason why they're saying these things is because jobs. Because of the nationalist movement that's going on in Mexico. A lot of Mexicanos have this idea of hatred. And so that's why this is happening. See, the Colorado Riverland first hired Japanese and Chinese workers because they were known as hard workers and for being humble. Here's where the thesis gets really interesting, but sad. Each side has their own, I have to give voice to both of them so that we can understand how the conflict is, why is it happening, ¿verdad? Mexican farmers were beginning to feel outrage towards the Chinese and Japanese because they had the land to work and had successful businesses. Well, some Mexicans arrived to Mexicali because of the Great Depression, couldn't even find a job. Here's where Mexico para los mexicanos, Mexico for the Mexicans. Let's play with our imagination for a minute. Imagine you're a Mexican that lived in LA for 5 years. LA, right? And this is 1925. You're being deported, and all of a sudden you're deported to Mexicali. All right, you're hungry, you're thirsty. You see Chinese restaurants, Chinese stores, all in Chinese. How are you gonna feel? Like you're not in Mexico, ¿verdad? Like an outsider. This is what's going on, and so they feel like an outsider, and then the other Mexicanos who have this anti-Chinese ideas are beginning to tell them, see, this is where we have to live every day. So the hatred for Chinese is beginning to escalate, right? And so we have here a problem. We have here a big problem because the Mexican government, who at that time is Elias Plutarco Calles, that's his real name, from Sonora, would say it's okay to hate the Chinese. And he even applauded a book we're gonna be seeing after the break called El Ejemplo de Sonora. Have you heard of that book? That book is the Bible of the anti-Chinese movement. And I have to have the copy of that book, not the original, a copy of that book. And it's full of negative propaganda towards the Chinese, and we'll talk about that. So, here's what's going on. Many Mexican farmers that worked in Japanese and Chinese ranches during the 1920s and late 1930s have said in countless interviews that they were mistreated by the Chinese and Japanese. Mexican farmers felt that they were foreigners in their own country. So let's, all right, okay. Remember I told you the ejemplo de Sonora? This is what el ejemplo de Sonora had in the propaganda. All right, let's read it. Oh, by the way, during the 1920s, you had the Crusade War, which is a war against the Catholic, the Mexican federal government against the Catholic Church. For 6 years, you had a war. And they'll say, let's say I'm a priest, and I'll say, ¿Quién anda ahí? ¿Quién vive ahí? And if I say, Viva Cristo Rey, I will not kill you. But if you say, Viva la República Mexicana, I'll kill you. And if I'm a soldier, and I'll say, ¿Quién anda ahí? And you say, Viva la República Mexicana, I will not kill you. But if you say, Viva Cristo Rey, I'll kill you. That is the war of the Cristeros. The Catholic Church against the Mexican government. Over you know the story of the Cristeros? No? Okay, here's the chisme. I'm gonna give you really quick. 1924, my great grandfather was there. I'm not joking, he was. And that began. Obregón had won the re-election. Now, sufragio efectivo no reelección. Not all the Mexicanos want him to be re-elected. He's eating breakfast in, what part of Mexico City is he eating breakfast? I forgot. But anyway, he's eating breakfast, and Obregón did not have an arm because Pancho Villa had lost the word in Canada. And he killed Pancho Villa as the president later on. And all of a sudden, you see a priest coming up to him, Viva Cristo Rey, shoots him. That's what the story says. In reality, everyone shot Obregón because he was re-elected president. And the slogan of the Mexican Revolution was sufragio efectivo no reelección, no re-election. So you had a war for 6 years, 4 years, the Mexican government against the Catholic Church. Okay, so in Sonora, you have this Mexican soldier saying, ¿Quién vive? Tú decilo primero, kind of making fun of how the Chinese talk. And at the bottom it says, so who are you? You tell me first. El chino no tiene más que un partido. El único que Judas abrazó el niño del oro. So basically saying Chinese is only allied to one party, the same as Judas had when he was received the golden coins. Judas was the one who put Jesus into the cross, remember? So basically it's saying the Chinese are traitors. That is in the ejemplo Sonora, and I'll show you another one. So now that we're talking, this is another one. If you're a Mexican woman, I'm not going to go ahead, but this is we'll talk later about this because it's just, okay, so you have the ejemplo Sonora. And so you had all of these accounts of attack towards Chinese and Japanese against the Mexicanos and vice versa. In the book Viaje Corazón de la Península, Testimonio de Manuel Lee Mancilla, whose father was Xu Li, had owned a ranch in the Valle Mexicali in the 1920s. He stated that the Mexicans had a problem against the Chinese. Xu Li said that the Mexican farmers could not stand the hard work of picking cotton. That's what he said. Many of them will only show up 3 days a week and will not show up to work on Monday and Fridays. Okay. Mexican workers will not show up to work, and on Tuesday they will still be drunk. That's what Manuel said. So the Mexicans said other things. In 1924, then government. Okay, so so there's conflicts going on, ¿verdad? At the same time, the Mexican government is like, you know what? You're beginning to become a little bit aggressive towards the Mexican citizens. We're going to create tax laws. By 1924, the Mexican government of Baja California, Abelardo Rodriguez, who will later be president of Mexico, made a deal with the Superior Riverline Company. This consisted that all the businesses of Baja California, including the Chinese and Japanese businesses, must pay a 50% of their work. So they must pay a tax of 50% to their Mexican